My job is to find missing people. After this case, I've never been the same. A few years back I was contacted by a family I'm friends with. They were searching for their missing daughter and her two friends. They had gone on a cross-country road trip. A week into their road trip, all contact between them and their families was cut off. The families went to the local police, but there wasn't much they could do, so they turned to me. The case was somewhat personal, so to say I was impatient to find them was an understatement. I first had the families pull up their messages between them and their children. I had to cover every base, from them wanting to run away from home to someone wanting to harm them. I got the license plate to the car they took and ran it through multiple databases to find it in any CCTVs along the roads they took. I got a ping that the car was seen at a gas station a few states over. The gas station was on a long desolate road. The road itself wasn't in the best condition and the gas station itself didn't look all that good. Upon showing the clerk at the gas station their pictures, he confirmed that he had seen him. They looked fine at the time and were headed west. I thanked him and followed the road westwards. While driving down the road, my tire went out and I crashed into the side railings. As unbelievably unlucky as I was, I thankfully didn't sustain any injuries, but I was now stranded in the middle of nowhere. I decided to survey the area and noticed that the trees looked damaged. The sun was setting, so I grabbed my flashlight and peeked over the edge of the railings. Perhaps the car went off into the gully. I placed the flashlight in my chest pocket and climbed down the hill. At the bottom of the hill lay a wrecked car. The car looked so heavily damaged that they shouldn't have been able to get out, but somehow there was no one inside. Though dried and nearly concealed by foliage, there were some blood splotches. I went to my radio to call for some police officers and an ambulance, but to my dismay all I got was static. A twig snapped behind me and before I had the chance to turn around, something hard connected with my head, and I found my vision go dark and my mind blank. I woke up in near pitch darkness, except for the light bulb that hung above me. My head throbbed painfully. What the hell happened? Assessing my condition, I was strapped to a chair with my legs and arms firmly bound. Based on my surroundings, I assumed I was in a basement. It smelled of rotten mold, and I struggled to not throw up. I could hear rats scurrying around just out of my line of sight. A door opened, and in walked a man who was so mutated, it was hard to say he was even human. "Hey, who the hell are you?" I shouted. He came closer, and I could see a horrible grin plastered on his face. He held a knife in one hand. "You're the one who took those 3 girls, weren't you? What did you do to them?" I asked. He didn't respond, but he had a displeased look on his face. Before I knew it, he stabbed the knife into my hand. My body jolted from the pain and I wanted to scream out in agony, but I held it in. "You sick bastard, you probably get off to this, huh?" "Well, hate to break it to you, but it'll take more than that to make me scream," I retorted through heavy breaths. He tilted his head and began twisting the knife in my hand. The pain was unbearable, but I refused to give him what he wanted. I couldn't help the tears that built up in my eyes and quickly fell. He was still dissatisfied, so he pulled the knife from my hand. He placed it over my pinky, lining it up. I struggled against my binds as I knew what he was about to do. However, before I could protest, he slammed the knife down and severed my pinky from my hand. I couldn't hold my screams any longer. "Go to hell." I screamed in agony. I heard his sick laugh echo throughout the basement. "Got you. I'll be taking this." Just like that he picked up my finger and left me in the basement to suffer alone in agony. The pain clouded my brain and made it hard to think straight. Blood still poured from my hand, coating the chair arm before dripping to the floor. After what felt like hours, I passed out from the pain and blood loss. I woke up once more and saw that my hand was bandaged with a dirty cloth. I looked up to see a horrific sight. In front of me sat a table with human body parts laid on it. The body parts were so mutilated you almost couldn't tell it belonged to a person. I gagged at the sight. Was he a cannibal? In his hands were a bowl and spoon. He was stirring the spoon in the bowl and turned towards me. Upon seeing I was awakened, he came over to me. The smell was putrid and I could feel my stomach turning at the sight of the contents of the bowl. I turned away, but he grabbed my face and forced my mouth open. He shoved the spoon in my mouth. It was horrible and tears filled my eyes. I spit the contents back out and vomited. He looked unhappy that I didn't eat it. He set the bowl down and walked over to a wall which held multiple tools. He grabbed some pliers and came back over to me. "What are you gonna do?" I asked, breathless. He didn't answer as he pulled off 3 of my fingernails. Tears fell from my eyes, and I screamed. His smile widened, and he laughed his creepy sick laugh. He didn't mind me and simply grabbed my fingernails, leaving me alone once more. Blood dripped from my fingertips. I hung my head low from exhaustion. Just how long have I been here? Out of sheer desperation, I moved my injured hand and, much to my surprise, it was easier to move than my other hand, perhaps due to the blood that coated it. I twisted and turned my hand slowly, releasing it from its bindings a little at a time. My hand and arm ached from the tight pull of the bindings, but after what felt like forever, my hand was free. I panted from the pain and held my hand close to my chest to relieve some of the pain. I then released my other hand and feet from the bindings. I rushed for the door, but it was locked. I searched around the basement, the dim light of the bulb being my only salvation. In one of the corners, I found a flashlight in a box. I flipped it on and was able to see considerably better. The basement floor was covered in old blood stains and rotten pieces of flesh, presumably human flesh. I dry heaved and focused on finding a weapon I could use. Unfortunately, whenever he left, he took his tools he had on the wall with him. I searched around and miraculously found a crowbar he left behind. I unscrewed the light bulb from its socket and fell into total darkness except for the light from the flashlight. I hid in a concealed area behind the door and waited for him to come back. After a while I heard heavy footsteps and readied myself in the encompassing darkness. The metal door screeched open, and he stepped into the basement. Perhaps due to the unexpected darkness in the once poorly lit basement, he paused. I used it to my advantage and swung the crowbar as hard as I could against the back of his head. He grunted and fell over. I ran up the stairs, tripping over some uneven boards, and came out into an old, run-down, and decrepit house. I rushed through the house and barged through the front door. I ran into the chilly night air. I could hear sounds from within the house and dread filled me. How was he up already? I ran blindly through the woods, tripping over tree roots and slipping on leaves covered in dew. I stepped on something cold and metallic, and before I had time to react, it clamped down on my leg. The bear trap broke my leg in several places, and I screamed as I fell over, blood pouring from my leg. I could hear movement in the woods from the direction I had come from. I knew it was him. I pried the trap open and thankfully got my leg out. My leg was messed up beyond belief. It was mangled and I could barely stand on it. The noise got closer, so I forced myself to run. This, however, didn't work, and he appeared right behind me and tackled me down. He had an ice pick and was trying to stab me with it. I struggled with him and managed to knock it out of his hands. I kneed him in the gut, which released his hold on me, and I scrambled for the ice pick. He grabbed my mangled leg and dragged me back to him. I yelled in pain as he flipped me over and began strangling me. I couldn't breathe and felt my consciousness slipping as I blindly grabbed for the ice pick. I felt the cool metal and saw a ray of hope. I grabbed it in my hand and with one swift movement stabbed it into his neck. I pulled it out as his body recoiled. His blood squirted out onto me as I breathed in once more. He fell back onto the ground making a gurgling noise. I struggled up and continued limping onwards. I soon found a dirt road which led me to the highway. I collapsed on the side of the highway just as a car spotted me and pulled over. The person rushed to me as I succumbed to the darkness. I don't know much of what happened after that, but I woke up in a hospital a few days later. I was told that I was probably held in that basement for about 4 to 5 days. I was told I had gotten lucky, but I didn't really feel like I had. Everything that happened broke me. How could I tell those families what had really happened to their children? For months after everything happened, I still couldn't stand the smell or sight of meat. In the end, I wasn't able to tell them. A police officer who arrived at the scene had too. This case really messed me up mentally and physically. I walked with a limp and relied on a cane. Mentally, I was even more screwed up. I could longer stand being near sharp objects, being in dark places, and I could no longer perform my job properly. I quit once I got well enough to go out and about. I'd like to say that somehow I'll get over this, but even after 4 years I haven't mentally recovered from it. I'm not sure why I decided to share this. Maybe I just needed to let it out, but I'll never be the same again.